with CLINCH, chatting all things MMA.
Hey, and welcome to the CLINCH on eNCA.com, where we talk about MMA in Africa and the rest of the planet. Today, I think we have a history maker in the sport here, a two-division champion in the EFC, the youngest champion in the history of that organization, and still undefeated in 6.5 years as a professional, Demant the Wolfpain. Demant, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been a while.
It has.
Yeah.
And in that, when I think about the intro, I was looking at some of the history and going back some of the old fights. When I talk about those kind of achievements, I mean, you still only 25, 26?
I just turned 26.
You're 26.
Yeah.
Congratulations this week, by the way.
Yeah. Thank you.
When you hear that kind of list of the achievements you've made, did you ever sit back and think, wow, I've really done something here?
I think the most important thing as an athlete and any sportsman, you need to make sure that you forget about what you did yesterday. Especially in a sport like MMA, guys are constantly improving, So if you get complacent and you sit on your bum weight thinking that you're this great athlete and someone else is going to come and take your spot. So I'm always motivated, I'm always trying to work harder than before. So I think that's the biggest thing, Sometimes I think about it, gives me a little bit of an extra motivation, especially where I came from as a fighter. I was training at a gym where I was the only professional athlete. We didn't have hanging bags, we didn't have mats, So, but that thing inspires you. Now that I'm in FFM, where we have the best fighters in the continent, I can only get better as I go along.
With that humility, which is appreciated, what do you think has been your greatest achievement today?
Wow, it's hard to separate everything, especially in the sport. But I think having the second title, was something that was...
Moved from featherweight to bantamweight.
Yeah. I think winning that second title was something quite... I was the first one to do it, so I think that was something that... stands out for me the most, yeah.
So you're the first two-division champion in the UFC.
Yeah. Then it was Chef, if I'm not mistaken, and Zulu.
That's right, yeah. It's a difficult question to ask, but there's been a perception of the sport, particularly in South Africa, that's quite a white-dominated sport.
Yeah.
And here you come in as the first black champion, and that was a great achievement. What was it like for you? And in terms of that kind of the context of race in the sport, were there challenges for you?
Not necessarily for me, because when you're in there, you might be black or white, but you're still fighting, So you're not fighting with the whole black nation with you or the whole, So, having said that, there are a lot more white athletes doing it, but it's not necessarily just a white dominant sport. If you look at the UFC, there's quite a lot of black athletes, and throughout the world, it's only now here in Africa that more black athletes are into the sport. But I think. Worldwide, it's evening out more and more. So, for me, not necessarily. I've always been. You have to be selfish in the sport, and you have to work hard for yourself only. So,
sure.
I haven't had a lot of problems going like that.
With that in mind, then, there's been a lot of criticism in the past throughout your career as in terms of your fighting style.
Yeah.
I think you've won submissions twice, TKO twice.
Yeah.
And went to decision by 7 times. And I can only term it as abuse, actually, in terms of what people talk about. And I never, I understand some of it, but I understand of it where a guy has good base wrestling and good jits, and some people say, oh, he's lay and pray. And it's another tough question to ask, and I want your honest answer. Yeah. Do you think you would have received that much insult and abuse as an undefeated champion for 5.5 years if you're a white athlete?
Wow. Okay, that's a very good question. Also, I think looking back at as a fighter myself, before I wasn't in an environment where my stand-up could improve more and more.
Right.
And if you look at my first fights, I was mostly wrestling based. But now, if you look at my last 4 fights, I've shown that I'm a well-rounded athlete, But I don't know how, maybe if it's true or not. But let's say if you look at a guy like the guy from CIT, that kid, what's his name, the one who beat Mark. Lyle Karam,
Yeah.
He's mostly of a hold you down kind of fighter, and he surely doesn't get the same criticism. But having said that, not because he's white or he's black, but if you look at a guy like Kabulu as well, which is a black guy, so he gets some criticism for that, and a few people as well criticize Lyle Karam for his way of fighting. So I think it's a bit split in a way. I can't really point out that if it's a major issue.
Yeah.
But for me, I took it in stride, and I'm getting better every day, not just in my ground game, but with my stand-up, And it was good for me to get that TKO win over Francois Groenevolds, People were quite surprised how I'm constantly improving as a fighter.
Yeah, your striking against Cedric Doyle was pretty on point as well, because he's great on the feet.
And a lot of people thought that he was going to knock me out, and I won the fight mostly with the stand-up.
Yeah. So you've had a remarkable career so far at a tender age, but also your personal life and your background's equally remarkable. Is it a help or a hindrance when people talk to you about your family background from Angola, and yet you just want to be a professional athlete and talk about the sport?
I think I don't know, but I can't forget about my past and who I am, and it's important for me to always remember where I come from. When the times are hard in the fight, you can always dig deep and think about what your grandfathers and fathers did for your country. The bravery they showed. They were fighting for their lives, and now I'm fighting for a paycheck. So it's quite different. So it's not as hard as the general person thinks when you step in there.
Yeah.
Because your life is not really in danger. But that's what I take my strength from.
Yeah.
I do this because I love to.
So with that in mind, with some of the viewers who don't know, that your grandfather was Jonas Savimbi, the founder of UNITA.
Yes.
And your father was Alindo Benbenpanu, who was the commander-in-chief of the UNITA army during the Angolan Civil War. But they were both known as great strategists as well as great fighters. I mean, is that something that you channel then, in terms of there's some genetic...
I don't know, maybe.
Your game plans always on point?
We did that Carte Blanche show then about the warrior gene, and we had myself and Castellano had the warrior gene. So I'm sure some of it has come through. But obviously not to that scale, because they were true warriors, They were fighting for their lives. One mistake and you're gone. So and I think the goal as well was a lot bigger. Now for me now I just fight to prove that anything is possible. Wherever you come from, it's important to stay motivated and achieve your goals. So
they were both fascinating, ma'am. Can I ask you about your memories in childhood of both of them?
My father, I don't really remember spending a lot of time with him because of obviously the circumstances due to the war, and he always had to travel, and he had a lot of responsibilities. And my grandfather as well, I would see him like once in I don't know how many times a year. So like mostly I grew up with my mom and my siblings.
Yeah, so you don't have many memories of...
No, not that many. I think with my father mostly when we were in Luanda, like later on when he wasn't as involved in the war.
Yeah.
So around 96, 97.
So after the elections.
Yeah, after the elections. And I think there I was with my father a lot more, but it was different back when we were still in war.
Is it a difficult position now? You're one of the biggest sporting stars in Angola. But is it difficult to weigh it up, because Angola is still a country that's essentially ruled by the MPLA, and here you are, a penner, one of the sport's biggest stars. I mean, is it tricky? Does it put you in a difficult position sometimes?
I think politics is such a cruel thing. So obviously, MPLA and UNITA have had this rivalry for so many years, and me being a grandson of Jonas Savimbi, who's a man that's still is, even though he's dead, hated amongst many people from MPLA. Obviously there's a lot of things, like you said. If I were maybe from MPLA, maybe I was gonna get more support from them, but I don't really like to discuss that much.
I agree with you as well. There's plenty of things we can say about the current Angola, and it's probably not the right place to say that.
Yeah.
I would say, however, that Southern Africa is going through a terrible drought at the moment, and particularly in Angola. I mean, the food insecurity and the malnutrition going in Angola with the kids at the moment is horrific. I know it's separate from MMA. We'll get back to right now. Do you think the international community is doing enough to help Angola right now?
I think the international community, the biggest issue is that they're in debt than the continent. When they come with their aids, a lot of it is loans. So I think it's up to us Africans to because we have such a rich continent. I think as Africans, we need to do more for each other instead of depending a lot more on the international community, because what happens, they in debt people, then all our kids and our their kids will still be indebted. So, you know, I think it's Africa. We need to make sure that we learn the skill necessary in order to produce for ourselves, you know, more and more. And we need to get Europeans to come and buy from us instead of us having to import everything else, you know.
So it's been quite a difficult year for you in terms of MMA. I mean, it's been a lot of go back and forth, particularly over the convoluted bout agreement with Irshad Sayed. So I want to ask, from your perspective, what happened?
So before, I mean, we were trying to go fight in the UFC, and unfortunately that didn't happen as of yet. So that's why we were going back and forth, because we had a little bit of a disagreement with UFC. Because obviously they didn't want me to leave, and because they wanted to make that a shot fight. So yeah, that was the issue. We had back and forth, and a lot of things, good and bad, were said between myself and the UFC, but at least that's all in the past. Now we are moving forward, and hopefully, you know, get this fight going, and who knows what's going to happen after.
I can't recall a fight saga as long as this in the EFC. I mean, it's going to be a cracking fight. I mean, is there more pressure on you as a result of this now? I mean, I don't want to ask that question. Is this the biggest fight of your career? Because every fight's a big fight. But there's protracted negotiations, and the amount of fans who weren't aware of those negotiations and those situations coming on social media, giving you a hard time, giving Irshad a hard time as well. I mean, does it put more pressure on going into this fight?
I think I always feel very nervous before I sign for my fight, you know. But after I sign and I'm putting in the work, things get a lot easier. I think every fight, you know, there's different pressures involved. For this one, you know, I know what I got to do to come out victorious, you know. Syed has fought, I think, 2 or 3 of my past opponents, but I don't think they fought them when they were at their best. You can see, I mean, he is confident and he believes in himself, but I don't think he's really been tested, and he hasn't really had to dig deep, you know, to show his heart there. So that's what I'm going to plan to do, and if he makes a mistake, then I'll definitely finish the fight.
The social media war between the two of you has been one of the biggest, I think, in the EFC, and we kind of, it's sometimes difficult for people outside the sport to differentiate between a true dislike between athletes and what is your job of essentially hyping up a fight. What are your real feelings towards Irshad Sayed?
In the beginning, I was getting a little bit upset because of that, but you know, it's essentially still a job that needs to be done, and I'm going to take emotion out of this, and I'm going to go in there, and I'm going to do what it takes, you know. But there are times, obviously, you get a little bit upset, but the good thing is that just drives me more to work harder and just be more prepared when the night comes.
One thing that blew me away from as I said again, people who weren't aware of what's going on was people actually accusing you, Mark Penno, of dodging a fight. I couldn't believe that when people were saying you were dodging him. Did that hurt your pride a little bit?
I think you know, as a man, you know, you always, your ego, that's the worst part of it all, you know. So I think I was a little bit upset about that, but because I believe I fought tougher guys than Syed, especially I think a guy like Vansel is a much more dangerous fighter than Syed, because of just his style of fighting. Is very wild and aggressive and strong wrestler. And I was a little bit angry at the stage, but I knew the bigger goal was obviously to compete on the global scale, which was the UFC. But now, you know, this is the fight that I've been handed, and this is the fight that I need to prove myself once again.
Funny enough, I don't think many people are aware, the fight is on 11th of November in Cape Town, but 11th of November is Independence Day in Angola, isn't it?
Yeah, ironically.
And no one's mentioned that.
It's Independence Day,
I'm sure Irshad is probably watching this right now. What do you have to say to him right now?
Look, I mean, it's just another guy, you know. I'm not going to put too much importance on him, you know. I just see a blank face, you know. I just got to go in there, do what I know best, and that's to win.
Yeah. What else do you want to achieve in your career now? Because you're like 26. We talked about those fantastic achievements. What lies ahead for you now?
You know, now obviously the most important thing now is the fight, and afterwards, you know, I have to really look back, and I really want to compete overseas, you know, because I mean, you get to a stage where how much more can you do here, you know? So, you know, I think that's the most important thing, you know, just get this fight done, you know, give him our all. And going forward and see what's bigger. I know that EFC as well, they have other plans in place for the organization. So hopefully things progress in that aspect. Who knows, then I'll have maybe more fights in EFC, but it's, you know, it's important to just keep looking forward, you know.
Funny enough, with that in mind, I had Gareth Soldier Boy McClellan in here on the show a few weeks ago, and I asked him a question about something that really irritates me, and I think it's because I'm impatient as a fan. But I asked him, like, do you really, how can we grow the sport of MMA on the African continent more than at the moment? And he kind of felt that, if you look back to the old days, like for the past 8 years perhaps, or just before the EFC started, the sport, he felt, has come a long way. But I kind of feeling impatient. How can we grow the sport on this continent more than what we are doing at the moment?
I think the MMA is an industry. I think it's more like politics, because there's so much rivalry, and normally what happens in the States, or what I can see, is that a lot of the times the guys can go train many places. It's like there's not so much beef in terms of you going to train with a certain guy or training with another guy. But here, the biggest issue is that if you get a guy, let's say from CIT, coming to train at FFM, it's a massive, massive problem. And now the thing is that we're not just facing guys from here. We're facing international guys. Look at a guy, let's say like Leo Maynard, if he had the freedom to maybe come wrestle a little bit at our gym or come do other stuff elsewhere, maybe would have had a better chance, against a guy that from the American guy he just lost to. So I think that's the biggest thing. There's too much rivalry between the gyms still, I think guys need to be more open-minded in terms of just improving the sport.
Well, I agree completely with you. We talked about the difficulty here you've had professionally, but in the personal life, it's been a wonderful year for you.
Yeah.
You got married. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You graduated. I mean, is this the happiest you've ever been? And do you feel really fulfilled? Feel fulfilled?
100%. I think in my personal life, 100%. I got a beautiful wife and that cares and loves me. So I think that's the most important thing in life.
I know you've got JP Base now taking on Boulder and Deloitte. So JP is one of your uprising flyweights at Fight Fit Militia, and they're fighting for the interim flyweight. Do you ever see a time when you'd ever go back down below 57 kilos again, or are you stuck at bantamweight now for the rest of your career?
I think bantam is the safest way in terms of obviously my health. Because making flyweight, I doubt I can.
Was it a tough cut for you before when you were a flyweight champ?
You mean bantamweight?
Yeah.
Bantamweight is hard to make bantamweight for me, to be honest. I need to diet for quite a long time, and if I had to make flyweight, no.
Really?
And I think it's gonna be way too hard.
One of the things I remember about you when you first joined Fight Fit Militia, you really kind of started. You filled that role of training the youngsters, which is something that a lot of people found endearing, even though I think it should be commonplace, and it is commonplace. I mean, and you're still training quite. I saw a social post from you this week. You're still training a lot of the youngsters at Fight Fit Militia. What does that give you?
I think it's important, to pass the knowledge, because this is a very short-term sport, You can only do it for so long, and it's important whilst you're doing it and quite active on it, still be able to pass on what you know. So I enjoy coaching, and it's a pity I can't do it that much because I'm training half of the time, but it's good when I have the time to actually teach. Yeah.
Well, Damar, it's been wonderful getting you in. I really appreciate this. There's some of these questions I've wanted to ask you for a long time. I really do appreciate your candor. I wish you all the very best success on the 11th of November.
Thank you.
And for the rest of your career here.
Thank you, my brother.
Thanks, Damar.
Take care, man. Cheers.
With CLINCH, chatting all things MMA.